I'm Emily Anderson, 25 years old, and this is the story of how my husband's greatest setback became our greatest blessing. 6 months ago, I married Michael, who comes from a farming family. The moment I first met him, I knew he was different. While most people saw farming as just manual labor, Michael saw it as an art form, though his true passion lay in transforming those ingredients into culinary masterpieces. I love seeing his face light up when he talks about cooking or when he prepares meals for me. His eyes sparkle with pure joy, like a child discovering something magical for the first time. Even now, after months of marriage, that spark never fails to make my heart flutter. Though he's a farmer's son, Michael prefers cooking with ingredients rather than growing them, which is why he chose to work at Le Jardin, one of the most prestigious restaurants downtown. The decision wasn't an easy one, especially given his family's expectations. When we got married, there was a heated discussion about who would take over the family farm. Michael's father, James, insisted that Michael, being the eldest son, should inherit it. The conversation took place during our wedding rehearsal dinner of all times. "I'm not taking over," Michael had said, his voice firm but trembling with emotion. "We talked about this many times. I want to cook." I could see he was getting emotional, his hands clenched tightly under the table, so I gently patted his knee to help him calm down. It was a gesture that would become our silent way of showing support through difficult moments. Once composed, Michael's eyes sparkled as he explained to his father, "Dad, I love cooking. I want to create dishes that showcase the incredible ingredients that farmers like you grow. Your work inspires me every day. I just want to honor it in my own way." James couldn't argue with Michael's unwavering determination. The passion in his voice was undeniable, and even though I could see the disappointment in his father's eyes, there was also pride. Eventually, it was decided that Michael's younger brother, David, would inherit the farm. David had always been more interested in agriculture anyway, often spending extra hours learning about crop rotation and sustainable farming practices from their father. As for me, I've always loved writing and social media, so I work from home as a content writer. My job involves creating engaging content for various clients, from local businesses to national brands. Working from home gives me flexible hours, which allows me to help out at the farm occasionally. I actually enjoy working with vegetables and fruits. There's something therapeutic about getting your hands dirty and watching things grow. The satisfaction of harvesting something you've nurtured from seed to fruit is incomparable. My in-laws are incredibly generous people. "Emily, take as many vegetables as you want," they often say, pressing fresh produce into my arms whenever I visit. Thanks to their generosity, we never have to buy produce, and our kitchen is always stocked with the freshest ingredients. There was still some lingering awkwardness since Michael chose cooking over farming against his family's wishes. During family dinners, I'd sometimes catch James looking at Michael with a mixture of pride and regret, especially when Michael would transform their humble vegetables into restaurant-worthy dishes. But Michael doesn't look down on farming at all. Quite the opposite. He respects it deeply. He often tells me stories about growing up on the farm, learning the rhythms of nature, and understanding the importance of patience and persistence. He admires how his parents use their years of experience and knowledge to grow produce despite unpredictable weather conditions. "It's like magic," he'd say, watching his father predict rain just by looking at the clouds, or his mother knowing exactly when to harvest each vegetable for optimal flavor. He's always been friendly with the neighboring farmers, exchanging cheerful greetings daily. The farming community is tight-knit, looking out for each other like an extended family. Walking through the local farmers market with Michael is like attending a family reunion. Everyone knows him and has a story to share. "Hey, Michael," they'd call out. "We had a great harvest today. Why don't you take some and cook something nice for your folks?" They'd send him home with fresh produce, knowing he'd transform it into something spectacular. The local farming community seemed to really like Michael. They appreciated how he bridged the gap between their world and the fine dining scene, always giving credit to the farmers who grew the ingredients he used in his dishes. Then one day, everything changed. Michael came home late one night. Usually he'd be home by 7 in the evening, but that day he returned at 9. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, dinner long cold, worry gnawing at my stomach. "You're late today. Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual as he hung up his coat. "Yeah, just busy. Don't worry about it," he replied, but I could see the exhaustion in his shoulders, the way he avoided meeting my eyes. I didn't press further that day, but this became a pattern. He started coming home at 9, 10, sometimes even after midnight. The spark in his eyes was dimming, replaced by dark circles and forced smiles. Whenever I'd ask if he was all right, he'd force a smile and say, "I'm fine," clearly trying not to worry me. But I could see the toll it was taking on him. His hands, usually steady and confident while cooking, would sometimes tremble with fatigue. Concerned, I decided to visit the restaurant one evening to check on him. Le Jardin was housed in a beautiful historic building, all gleaming windows and elegant architecture. But that evening, I wasn't interested in its beauty. I was worried about my husband. I found him alone in the kitchen prepping ingredients. The usual bustle of the kitchen was replaced by the lonely sound of his knife against the cutting board. Though I knew I shouldn't enter the kitchen, I couldn't help calling out, "Michael?" He looked up startled. "Emily, what are you doing here?" His voice echoed in the empty kitchen. "I've been worried about you working so late every night. Why are you doing prep work alone?" While continuing his work, his knife rhythmically chopping through vegetables, he explained, "You know Thomas, right? His parents are seriously ill, and he needs to take care of them every day, so I've been covering his prep work. And that's why I'm getting home late. Sorry for worrying you." Thomas Grant was another chef at Le Jardin, someone Michael had mentioned a few times before. They'd started working at the restaurant around the same time, though Thomas came from a culinary school background, while Michael had learned through hands-on experience. I was touched by his kindness, but concerned about his health. The dark circles under his eyes were getting darker, and I noticed he'd lost weight. "Maybe you should talk to the other staff," I suggested, leaning against the doorframe. "Surely they could help share the load." "Thomas doesn't want others to worry, but he confided in me. I want to help him out. Don't worry, I'll be home soon. Go get some rest." "Don't push yourself too hard," I said, before heading home alone, the sound of his knife against the cutting board following me out. A few days later, while Michael was still working these long hours, something unthinkable happened. The restaurant's entire day's earnings were stolen, nearly $50,000 gone without a trace. The police were called immediately, but with no leads or suspects, the investigation stalled. The security cameras had been tampered with, showing only static during the crucial time frame. Then, the finger-pointing began among the staff. The once peaceful kitchen became a hotbed of suspicion and accusations. "That person seems to be having money troubles," one server whispered. "That one's suspicious too," another cook muttered. People were throwing around baseless accusations, almost enjoying the drama that had invaded their usually orderly workplace. But then, one statement narrowed down the suspect list to a single person. "I've seen Anderson staying late alone multiple times," Thomas said, his voice carrying across the kitchen during a staff meeting. "He was alone, and he knows how to open the safe, right?" Yes, the same Thomas whose prep work Michael had been covering threw him under the bus with complete lies to the owner. The same person who had supposedly been at home caring for his ill parents was now pointing fingers at the very person who had been covering his shifts. Michael vehemently denied it. "I would never steal," he exclaimed, his voice rough with emotion. "I was just helping cover Thomas's work because he said he needed to care for his parents." But others started whispering, their voices carrying through the kitchen like poison. "Maybe he did it because his family's farm isn't doing well?" "Maybe that's why he wanted to work in such a fancy restaurant in the first place." The owner, Mr. Lauren, just said, "Well, there's no proof, but you have been staying late. I'll need to think about this." His French accent made the words sound even more dismissive. I knew about the theft from Michael. He'd call me that night, his voice shaking as he told me what had happened. And I knew he was being suspected. The weight of those suspicions seemed to physically crush him, making his shoulders slump and his steps heavy. All I could do was encourage him. "I know you didn't do it. I'm on your side. You can quit if it's too hard. I held him close each night, feeling his body shake with suppressed emotions. Then came the final blow. Mr. Laurent called Michael into his office early one morning.
Anderson, while we don't have proof it was you, these rumors are affecting our reputation. I'm sorry, but today will be your last day.
Michael stood there speechless, the dream he worked so hard for crumbling around him. Then, Thomas approached him in the locker room as Michael was gathering his things. His words were like knives, each one carefully chosen to cause maximum pain.
I guess poor people only think about stealing money. Farming doesn't pay well, huh? That's what you get for being from a farming family. You should just stay at the bottom where you belong. Good riddance to having a coworker like you.
Michael only said one thing to Thomas's taunts.
How are your parents doing? Huh? They're perfectly fine, you idiot.
Hearing this, Michael just laughed softly and said,
That's good to hear.
Before leaving the restaurant for the last time. Then I received the message from Michael.
I got fired.
Oh no, was all I could say, my heart breaking for him. It was all lies, Michael said listlessly when he got home, sitting heavily on our couch. The spark in his eyes had completely disappeared, replaced by a dull emptiness that scared me. Even in this situation, he was genuinely glad Thomas's parents were healthy. My husband truly was the kindest person I knew, and it hurt to see his kindness being used against him. I gripped my phone, ready to take action, to call the police, to demand justice, but Michael patted my knee just as I had done for him before. Looking at his face, I saw more sadness than anger. The betrayal seemed to have drained all the fight from him. Seeing his grief, I realized that my kind-hearted husband wouldn't be happy even if I tried to prove his innocence. He needed time to heal, to find his path again. After some time had passed, I suggested we help out at the family farm to lift his spirits. The fresh air and the physical work might help clear his mind. Though things were awkward at first between Michael and his father, they gradually started enjoying their conversations. I guess blood runs thick after all. James never said, "I told you so," about the restaurant, instead showing his support through quiet understanding and patient teaching. As the vegetables and fruits grew ready for harvest, Michael would show them to me with a smile. Slowly, the spark began returning to his eyes, though in a different way than before. One day, some neighboring farmers called out to Michael in the fields. The summer sun was high, and we were all taking a break under the shade of an old oak tree. "We've been seeing you around the farm lately. What happened to the restaurant?" Michael smiled and said,
I got fired, actually. Now I'm helping out at the family farm.
The farmers immediately responded with indignation. "That fancy restaurant must be no good if they'd fire someone as kind as you. I don't even want to eat their food. Honestly, I hate supplying them with produce. They're always so arrogant. Who do they think they are?" Apparently, they had quite a few grievances built up. This wasn't surprising. The local farmers supplied produce to the restaurant. However, they often heard comments like, "You're just farmers after all," and faced condescending attitudes. The restaurant didn't have a good reputation among the farming community. As if venting long-held frustrations, the farmers started sharing their complaints about the restaurant after hearing about Michael's situation. Stories of late payments, unreasonable demands, and disrespectful treatment poured out. Then one farmer, Old Joe, who'd been quietly listening, said something interesting.
Hey, Michael, you're an amazing chef. Would you like to be the chef at our farm-to-table restaurant?
Your restaurant? Michael was surprised but decided to hear him out. I could see a glimmer of interest in his eyes. The farmers ran a small buffet-style restaurant to showcase their fresh produce. It had been struggling lately, lacking the expertise to truly highlight the quality of their ingredients. All the farmers unanimously said, "With your cooking, Michael, more people will appreciate our vegetables and fruits." Seeing their genuine smiles, Michael replied, "I'll do my very best," and accepted their offer. The spark in his eyes was different now. Less bright, perhaps, but somehow deeper, more meaningful. When Michael came home and told me about becoming the chef at the farm-to-table restaurant, I was overjoyed. I hadn't seen his eyes sparkle like that in a long time. I immediately started researching restaurant management and operations. This was our chance to build something together, something that would honor both Michael's cooking skills and his farming heritage. I told Michael, I want to help make the restaurant even better. The next day, I went to greet the farmers. I'm Emily Anderson, Michael's wife. Thank you for taking care of my husband. I'd love to help with the farm-to-table restaurant in any way I can. And they welcomed me warmly. Oh, Michael's wife, we're glad to have you. Their weathered faces broke into genuine smiles, so different from the polite mask worn at Le Jardin. I can help write online content and look into government grants for small businesses, I offered, already planning how to modernize their approach. None of us knew anything about that stuff, so that would be really helpful. They were enthusiastic, so I immediately started reaching out to the county office. The county officials were surprisingly supportive, viewing this as a project that could revitalize the local community. They agreed to consider providing grants under their rural development program. I was relieved to see how genuinely happy the farmers were to have Michael as their chef. They treated him like family, sharing farming tips and stories, making him feel truly valued. Michael immediately started developing new menu items. He spent late nights experimenting with ways to highlight the farmers' lovingly grown produce without over-processing it, preserving its natural freshness. It made me happy to see him working so passionately late into the night again. This time, though, it was different. He wasn't working for someone else's dream. He was building our own. Of course, I was worried about his health, but his eyes were sparkling again. The spark had returned, stronger and more determined than ever. I wrote numerous articles about the restaurant as a content writer. Stories about local farming traditions, sustainable agriculture, and farm-to-table cooking. Each piece was designed to build anticipation for our opening. I also posted extensively on social media, sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses of our journey. Photos of Michael in the fields at dawn, selecting the day's ingredients. Videos of him explaining his cooking philosophy. Stories about the farmers who made it all possible. Even before opening, we were receiving comments from people excited to visit. Can't wait to taste real farm-to-table food. Finally, a restaurant that respects its ingredients. Showing Michael and the farmers the positive online response encouraged them, making everyone even more determined to make the grand reopening a success. Finally, we received the grant I had applied for, which helped update the exterior to a modern, welcoming look. We replaced the worn-out sign with an elegant wooden one, restored the weathered facade, and added a cozy outdoor seating area surrounded by herb gardens. All that remained was opening day.
I'm a bit nervous,
Michael and the farmers admitted over coffee on opening morning. The aroma of fresh bread and herbs filled the kitchen as Michael prepared for the day ahead. The morning sun streamed through the newly cleaned windows as we successfully reopened the new farm-to-table restaurant. The space had been transformed from a rundown cafe into a warm, inviting restaurant that perfectly balanced rustic charm with modern comfort. The first day saw only a handful of customers, but each one left with a smile. "This is delicious," they exclaimed. "You can really taste the freshness of the vegetables." One elderly couple stayed after their meal to tell us about their experience. "We've eaten at fancy restaurants all over the country," the gentleman said. "But this reminds me of my grandmother's cooking. Pure, honest food." Within a week, more customers started coming. Word of mouth quickly spread in our small community, and soon we had regulars who came in nearly every day. After 2 weeks, there was consistently a line of people waiting to be seated. The sight of people willing to wait for our food brought tears to old Joe's eyes. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered, pretending to wipe sweat from his brow. Customers praised everything. "The vegetables are so fresh. The cooking is amazing. The fruits taste incredible." We received countless positive reviews online, each one validating our approach to honest, farm-fresh cooking. Michael and the farmers were overjoyed seeing the customers' smiling faces. Every morning, they would gather before dawn to harvest the day's ingredients, sharing stories and laughter as they worked. The buzz caught the attention of Farm and Table, a major food magazine specializing in sustainable cuisine. They requested to do a feature story, intrigued by our unique collaboration between farmers and a former high-end restaurant chef. We happily agreed, showing them our authentic approach to ingredients, cooking, and management. Their journalist Sarah spent a week with us, following our process from field to table. The journalists were amazed to see the entire process, from harvesting in the fields to serving at the buffet. They watched as Michael worked directly with the farmers, planning menus around what was its peak ripeness. We handled everything ourselves, from picking the vegetables to plating the dishes. There were no middlemen, no compromises, just pure, fresh food served with pride. After tasting the food, they exclaimed, "This is delicious and so fresh!" Sarah, who had reviewed restaurants worldwide, said she never tasted vegetables with such vivid flavors. "You can really taste a difference with same-day harvested produce." When asked about the secret to the delicious food, Michael proudly answered, "I create dishes that preserve the natural flavors of the vegetables and fruits that the farmers put so much care into growing. The real artists here are the farmers who nurture these ingredients." Later, when the magazine was published, we all gathered in the restaurant after closing to look at it together. The farmers, usually so stoic, crowded around like excited children. To our surprise, we had been ranked #1 in customer satisfaction and featured as the must-visit destination of the season. The article praised not just our food, but our entire philosophy of connecting people with the source of their food. Even I, Michael, and the farmers were shocked. We knew we were doing well, but national recognition? That felt surreal. We all celebrated together, shouting, "We did it!" Old Joe even shed a few tears, though he blamed it on the onions he'd been cutting. "Let's keep working hard" became our daily mantra as we encouraged each other. The success only made everyone more determined to maintain our standards. Thanks to the feature, we had lines for both lunch and dinner every day, and the restaurant was thriving. But more importantly, we were creating something meaningful, a bridge between farmers and food lovers. While enjoying these successful days, Michael and I had decided to take action on something. The truth about Thomas needed to come out, not for revenge, but for justice. On the restaurant's day off, we visited Michael's former workplace together. Le Jardin looked exactly the same, its elegant facade hiding the drama that had unfolded within its walls. We asked the host, we'd like to speak with Thomas Grant, and we were shown to a private dining room. The room was opulent, with crystal chandeliers and silk wallpaper, everything our humble restaurant wasn't. After a while, Thomas barged in without knocking, his chef's whites pristine as always. His face twisted into a sneer when he saw us.
Well, well, if it isn't the poor couple. Welcome to our fine establishment. How did you manage to afford coming to such a luxurious restaurant? Is it your anniversary or something? That must be it. You'd need a special occasion to justify spending a month's salary here.
Thomas continued his mockery, each word dripping with disdain.
I hear you're playing restaurant these days, and it's somewhat popular. Well, anything new gets attention at first. What, did you come here to brag? Oh right, you're farmers. No wonder it smells earthy in here. Sanitation is important these days. Oh, I don't see any hand sanitizer around.
I was boiling with rage. My hands clenched so tight, my nails dug into my palms. But Michael patted my knee, just as I had done for him before. His touch was steady, confident. We really were a perfect match. At that moment, Thomas said,
Found it,
and poured the wine we had ordered over Michael's head. The rich, red liquid soaked through Michael's shirt, staining it purple. Hey! I stood up instinctively, my hair scraping against the floor. But Michael just said,
It's okay.
His voice was calm, almost amused. Thomas's taunting continued, his voice growing louder with each word.
Wine is alcohol too, and ours is premium quality, so that should sanitize you properly.
He kept laughing, the sound echoing off the fancy wallpaper. Then Michael spoke quietly, his voice barely above a whisper.
Thomas, shall we go to the police? What are you talking about? There's no crime in pouring wine. Have you finally lost your mind?
Thomas shouted, his face reddening.
No, I'm not going to the police about the wine. We're going for the embezzlement charge. What are you talking about? When did I ever embezzle anything?
Thomas remained defiant, but I noticed his left hand trembling slightly. Michael calmly continued, his wine-soaked shirt dripping onto the expensive carpet.
Remember when the earnings were stolen? That was you! Michael spat the words out. The owner was being kind by not reporting you to the police because you're poor. You should be grateful.
His voice cracked on the last word. But Michael persisted, as steady as always.
No, it wasn't me. You stole it, Thomas. Shut up! I didn't do anything. Stop making false accusations.
Thomas grabbed Michael's collar, wine droplets splattering between them.
Would you like to hear this recording?
Michael said, and I pressed play on my phone. The sound of Thomas's voice filled the private dining room, recorded months ago in the empty kitchen of Le Jardin.
Man, this fancy restaurant makes serious money, but they're all such idiots, thinking nobody would steal. Anyone could open that safe if they wanted to. Now I just need to pin it on Anderson and I'm set for life. This is too easy.
Thomas's face turned pale, the color draining from his cheeks like a water down a drain. His earlier bravado completely vanished as he muttered quietly, backing away from Michael.
This must be fake, he whispered. Nobody would believe such evidence.
I cut off Thomas's words, stepping forward. I visited the restaurant several times because I was worried about Michael working late. I found you there, even though you supposedly had to care for your sick parents. I became suspicious and recorded your conversation.
That must be a mistake,
Thomas whispered, but I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I recorded you bragging about the theft. By the way, I'm a fairly well-known writer. If you don't turn yourself in, I'll make this recording go viral. Yes, I had recorded the voice of the real thief from the restaurant incident. When I visited the restaurant worried about Michael, I heard someone foolishly bragging about the theft in what they thought was an empty kitchen, so I recorded it just in case. Of course, I told Michael about the recording when he was fired. I couldn't identify the voice then, but Michael immediately said,
That's Thomas. Thomas stole the money.
Let's take this to the police, I had urged that night. But Michael said,
He must have his reasons. Let's drop it.
Choosing to bear the false accusations rather than fight back. However, after being involved in the farm-to-table restaurant's renewal, Michael understood how important restaurant earnings were and how many people were affected. He saw how every penny we earned went back into supporting local farmers and their families. He couldn't forgive someone stealing such important money anymore. That money represented not just profits, but people's livelihoods, their dreams, their hard work. That's why Michael decided,
we should use this evidence to make him confess to the police. This isn't right, and he needs to admit his wrongdoing and face the consequences.
After Michael made this decision, I joined him in confronting Thomas. We weren't seeking revenge. We wanted justice, not just for Michael, but for everyone who had been affected by the theft.
I didn't do it. Anyone could fake such evidence.
Thomas still refused to admit his crime, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. I could tell the police about you. You're the most suspicious based on circumstantial evidence.
That's why the owner fired you.
As soon as Thomas said this, another voice joined our conversation.
Grant, you're fired. I won't let someone who can't even admit their own crimes cook for our customers.
Mr. Laurent had entered the private room, his face stern and disappointed. He had heard the entire conversation. The owner's presence seemed to deflate Thomas completely. Thomas pleaded,
But sir, you agreed Anderson did it, so...
clinging to the owner's pant legs like a desperate child. However, Mr. Laurent shook his head.
I was wrong to fire Anderson without evidence, but you're even worse, having clear evidence against you and still refusing to admit it. Either you go to the police yourself, or I'll report you. Your choice,
the owner said sternly, his French accent making the ultimatum sound even more final. Realizing he couldn't talk his way out anymore, Thomas finally broke down. Tears streamed down his face as his carefully constructed facade crumbled.
Okay, I did it. I'm sorry. I'll go to the police myself,
he said tearfully as he left the restaurant. His pristine chef's whites now as stained as his reputation. Thomas's retreating figure looked more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I felt relieved that Michael's name was finally cleared. The weight of false accusations that had been hanging over us for months finally lifted. Michael looked relieved too, though there was no triumph in his expression, only sadness for a fellow chef who had lost his way. A few days later, Mr. Laurent personally came to our house to apologize. He brought with him a bottle of the same wine Thomas had poured over Michael, though this time it was meant for drinking. He also informed us that Thomas had properly turned himself in, confessing everything to the police.
Michael,
Mr. Laurent said, his voice heavy with regret.
I deeply regret not believing in you and firing you. I'm truly sorry. Would you consider coming back to work at the restaurant?
The owner bowed his head deeply as he asked, something I never thought I'd see from the proud Frenchman. However, Michael replied with a gentle smile.
I'm really enjoying working with the farmers at our restaurant. I'll continue working there. Thank you for everything you've done for me in the past.
He declined the offer to return, and I couldn't have been prouder of him. He had found his true calling, not in the glamorous world of fine dining, but in the honest work of farm-to-table cooking. Today, our farm-to-table restaurant is as busy as ever. Each morning begins with the farmers harvesting fresh produce while the sun rises, their silhouettes moving through the misty fields like dancers in a familiar ballet. Michael transforms their harvest into delicious dishes that respect the ingredients' natural flavors. His cooking has evolved. It's simpler now, more honest, but somehow more delicious than anything he ever made at Le Jardin. I love watching Michael work with that sparkle in his eyes. It's different from the spark he had at the fancy restaurant. Deeper, more content, more connected to the earth and the people around him. We still spend every day in harmony with the farmers. Old Joe still complains about his onion-induced tears whenever a customer compliments the food. The younger farmers still tease Michael about being a fancy chef, even though he's one of them now. Looking at the line of customers waiting outside, Michael adjusts his apron and says, "Looks like another busy day ahead." And together, we greet them with genuine smiles. Welcome to our restaurant. The morning sun streams through our windows, casting warm light on the freshly harvested vegetables displayed at the entrance. The smell of earth and growing things mingles with the aroma of cooking, creating something new and wonderful, just like us.